Yeah, that was the money girl I needed to get off on. So population of Switzerland on the part of Switzerland, 1/3 of Switzerland, about 5 million square miles, is 1/6 the size of the OzArk Plateau. When you take the population density of Switzerland, 1,200 people per square mile, and look at our 40 people per square mile, you know, my calculation were that the OzArk Plateau could sustain a population of 50 million people. We have about 4.5 million cattle, and I said we could easily have 45 million cattle, the next order of magnitude. And I made the statement, I said, in fact, well, people from other states can bring their entire herds here. And I love one of the very first time we came, Passover, and you made the statement, next week is going to be the most important sermon I've ever preached in my entire life. I think I'll come back for that. And anyway, he was ripping. I mean, I was sitting on an aisle seat, and I'm taking notes. Just fast. And at one point, I ripped a sheet off and flung it so I get to the next sheet. And the paper spun out in the aisle and went on the floor, you know. So my son Ian, you know, he sat there the whole thing, you know. And a couple weeks later, he said, "Dad, read this poem I wrote." And he had taken Dan's sermon and condensed it into this beautiful, beautiful poem. And I mean, I write poetry, and it took me like I changed maybe a word in a spelling, 2 or 3 things, and it was like phenomenal. This was before computers, so someday he may find it, and, you know, who knows. But Dan's the core of the message was, you know, speaking and being creative, as I recall, the power of the spoken word. Well, as I wrote that and spoke that about the cattle, Ian had in process a verbal contract for pasture and a verbal contract to bring a herd here from Colorado. And within 2 weeks, he had a signed contract on both cases, and in 2 months, the cattle were here. And hard on their heels came another herd from Nebraska, and then a second herd from Nebraska. And he has herds here from Kansas now. So we could sustain a lot of cattle and a lot more people. Now, why am I, you know, like focused on a whole bunch of people? Well, if, as George Washington's vision states, invasion from the East Coast, West Coast, South, North, I mean, that's, you know, the whole Canada, all the landmines, thank you, Princess Diana. There's no landmines in Canada. The Germans and the Russians have been building, you know, roads, you know, from Alaska to America. And so you have, you know, invasion from all coasts, you know, tsunamis, and actually as we speak, the coastlines are being eroded quite rapidly. So you have an invasion. Now another thing I just saw, this is about 2 days ago, there are mathematical and different guidelines on whatever for warfare. If you have a besieged position, you need to have 4 times the number of defenders, 4 times the number of attacking in your attacking army than you do defenders. If an army of 200 million comes in, you need 50 million, you know, defenders. So there we go. Alrighty. The major stuff of my message, gaining clarity and content over the years, is that at some point in the future, this is exactly where we're at. Good timing. After economic collapse, civil unrest, war, WROL, what is that? Survivors, preppers. Without rule of law, no rule of law. Okay. If things break down to that point, etc., at some point will come invasion. At that point, there will be one major place of refuge in the CONUS, that's the continental United States, to the point of literally being a refugium. Do not gloss over these definitions, read them. Click. They are perfect descriptions of what the OzArk Plateau will become. A refugium, an area that has escaped ecological changes occurring elsewhere and so provides a suitable habitat for relict species. And I assume that means surviving species. A geographical region that has remained unaltered by a climatic change affecting surrounding regions and that therefore becomes a haven for relict fauna and flora, an area where conditions have enabled a species or a community of species to survive after extinction in surrounding areas. So when one of the very first, was that first passage I just mentioned, Went up to the visiting speaker, said, looking for confirmation that this is going to be a safe region. And he said, oh, well, over the Midwest once upon a time, but, and this is a story that's been run around and everything, but he said, Corey Ten Boom was on an airplane flight over the Midwest, had a window seat, looked out the window and saw a circular area which was surrounded by a wall of fire. Inside, children were playing, pastures were green, goats and cattle grazing, and outside everything was devastation, chaos, anarchy, pestilence, famine, war, drought, and death. And so, one time I went outside, it was on the Sabbath, and as I recall, and I hear something, and I'm like, that's my grandkids. And I looked out, the pastures were green, and there were cattle out there, and I was like, ah, right. Got that one. Back up. Okay, Psalm 91, the light and shadow of the mighty, Psalm 91 up there, temple or land of Goshen. Okay, so this area appears to be the area where people are going to be led by Yah's judgment, and the final initial gathering region. Anyway, many will be driven here. This area will be the third stage of the gathering. Second stage, yeah. First part will be people being gathered here and there and everywhere. Mercy cloud, the little blobby area there. Those fearing the mark of the beast, chip implant, blah blah blah, eye scan. They're going to go there. Cities of refuge. You can call it a remnant refuge camp. Probably remnant refugee camp. An Israelite encampment or whatever, but this appears to be the area, something cities of refuge, so get the idea. And yeah, that's ho ho come forth in the land of the north. Okay, that's, yeah, Ezekiel. And in that one, Noah looked out of the ark and saw God's judgment falling upon the wicked. Think foreshadowings, types of foreshadowing. So that was that map I was talking about. That's pretty fascinating there. Just click through, and I want to take a time. Is an hour and a half we were talking initially? Is that okay? Because at some point I want to just break for a while and just give everybody a break and do a question and answer if anybody has any insights. And one thing I'd say is, you may have an insight. It happened to me that when I was lecturing at the, this is the preparedness act. I'll never, everybody and his brother there, some believers, not all believers. But I made a statement. I said, if anybody has an insight or something, you might see something or hear something, let me know. So while I was talking about Ezekiel 38, Doug Bridgetower was there with his wood gas operation, and he runs his truck on wood.